We would like to acknowledge that the episodes in this series are produced on the traditional unceded lands of the Coast Salish peoples, which includes the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. We thank them for allowing us to be their guests.
After I left Tammanoose, I kind of taught and sort of tried to recover from being depressed, and then I decided to take this course at the BC Alliance for Arts and Culture, which was called, what was it called? It was a course for artists. It was a month long, and it was the Search program. Thank you, Susie. Yeah. Yes, the Search program. And that was a program where you went, full days, 5 days a week, right. And they talked to you about how you could make a living as an artist, or to think outside the box about how you could do that.
Yeah.
And I was a single mother with 2 small children, working in the arts, didn't have a steady income, except for the teaching, and thank God for child support. That's all I can say. Mm-hmm. And then I learned something twigged in me, and I thought, they said, sometimes your journey isn't always a straight journey from A to B. Sometimes you have to take a detour to get from A to B or A to Z. And I thought, oh, that's a different way of thinking about it. I thought I could take a detour. What could I do? And then I thought, oh, I could, apply for that job at the Norman Rothstein Theatre. And that's what I did, and I got the job. Mm-hmm. Because when I was running Tammanoose...
Now, what was that job exactly?
That job was to be the, I don't know if it was called the artistic director of the Norman Rothstein Theatre, or whether it was called the executive director or the managing director. I can't remember what the title was. But it was basically to get theater up and running, to get it programmed, to get it rented, mm-hmm. to get more shows in there. Right. And of course, having come from working in the professional world, I knew that the way to do that was to collaborate with artists, and by giving them the space, mm-hmm. and getting them in there to bring their work there, and giving them a really good deal, so that they would bring their work there, and that's what we did. And then I went to Toronto to the Ashkenaz Festival, and I met Chris from Crow's Theatre. What's your last name, Chris? It's just slipped my mind. Will come to me. Who now runs Crow's Theatre, and a playwright that he was working with, and they had a show called The Psychoanalysis of Adam R. Zadok. And I saw it, and I thought it was really well done. And I thought, oh, I could bring that show to think I could start a festival. My God, I could start a festival, a Jewish festival. So, even though I wasn't Jewish. So I took the idea back to the person who was my supervisor at the Jewish Community Center. And they said, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And we got some seed money, and we brought the show, and we brought, I think Tara Cheyenne was in that first show with Toby McGuire. I can't remember what all the programming was, but we started the festival,
right.
And slowly built the festival. But I only stayed there for 4 years at the festival.
That was Chutzpah.
That's the Chutzpah Festival, yeah. So it was a pretty success, and I have to say that working with the Jewish community was a dream. They are so supportive, and they believe in the arts, and they believe in the value of the arts, and they put their money where their mouth is.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
So it was a wonderful community to work in. Mostly, I do have to say that I left there, and the reason I left there was because there was a sense that I couldn't walk my talk. I had brought in a show in that a friend of mine had done that was about genocide. And in the program, when we were describing it, we talked about the genocides that had happened in the world, and I think we mentioned Palestine.
Right.
And I was hauled in front of the board of the directors at the Jewish Community Center and told that I was not allowed to do that. And I said, but this is art. You can't censor art. And they said, oh, yes, we can. And so they told me that, you know, I had to change the program.
Right.
And so when that happened, I didn't like it.
No,
I
of
didn't
course
like
not.
that.
Yeah.
So I saw the job come up at Presentation House, and I had done Streetcar, produced and directed Streetcar at Presentation House, and I loved the space. I loved the intimacy of that small theater over there.
Yeah, it's a nice small theater.
So
yeah.
when that job came up, and I knew that that theater had really strong municipal funding, right? So I thought, I'm going to apply for that job, and I did, and I got that job, and I stayed there for 8 years, and again, I built that theater, and I started doing more professional programming and created a season and a series, and got people like Jay Brazeau and Nikki Cavendish involved.
And Jay loves that theater.
Yeah.
He's like you know, one day they'll name it after him, you know, if he keeps going.
Yeah.
You just really ignited something with
Well,
him.
and The Goat, what a
Yeah.
show that was,
Yeah,
eh?
yeah.
It was great, and so we did that, and then, and so I was back to directing again, but I wasn't back to creating work, which has been what I had done, you know, early in my career when I first started, and, you know, with Susie and with Marie and those folks. I liked the idea of creating work. So that was not completely satisfying, but at the same time, I do have to say that I didn't feel like I was missing out, because what really motivated me and made me feel that I was doing something meaningful was that I was creating opportunities for other artists.
Uh-huh.
And so it was okay for me not to do my art. It was okay because I was helping other artists do their art.
Mm-hmm.
And that seemed like a good thing to do. And plus, I could make a living doing that, whereas I couldn't make a living doing the other thing.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
And then, of course, a job came up at the Magnetic North Theatre Festival, which I had been to and thought was fabulous. And I applied for it, and I got it.
Let's explain what that is to people.
Well, the Magnetic North Theatre Festival was a festival that was started through the National Arts Centre in Ottawa. Mary Vingo, Heather Redfern, a group of people who, I don't know if Mary was hired, but Heather was very much involved in setting that up. And there was just this belief all around the country that there needed to be a national Canadian theatre festival in Canada, because we didn't have one.
Right.
And so those folks set it up, and they lobbied, because there were big people involved. Marty Meriden was one of them.
Yeah.
She was the artistic director at NEC at that time of English Theatre. And so they basically went to the funders, and the funders just came through like that, because there was this demand from all of these people.
Yeah, from everybody.
You know, from people from Stratford, from Shaw, from all of these big theatres who were saying, we need a Canadian theatre festival, right?
Everybody's pulling in the same direction.
Everybody was pulling in the same direction. And so they created that festival, and Mary Vingo was there, and then Ken Cameron was there before me, and then and Ann Connors was there, and then myself. And that was just such an honor to have that job. It was a tough job, because the thing about the Magnetic North Theatre Festival was that it moved around the
Right.
country every other year,
Yeah.
and went home to Ottawa at the National Arts Centre in between those years.
Right.
So I was programming a festival every year and traveling a lot around the country to see shows that I could bring in to program. It was quite a wonderful experience. It was, I saw more theatre at that time.
And more places.
In those 5 years, and saw Canada, you know.
Yeah, right.
And took the festival to Calgary, to Halifax, to Whitehorse, and then in between those years in Ottawa. I was there for 5 years.
Yeah.
And the last festival I did was in Whitehorse. And one of the things that was always a challenge in that role was that there was always pressure from the funders particularly Canadian Heritage, although I had a wonderful relationship with Canadian Heritage. They were so good to me and so supportive of the festival, I have to say. And Randy Miller.
Okay.
And but there was always that pressure that they would get, because it's always about growth. You know, the government, growth, money, growth. And so the festival was very hard to grow because it was always moving, right?
Right.
You were going into a
Right.
new city
Right.
every 2 years.
Yeah.
And so you would, in Ottawa, you would get pretty good attendance, you know, but was only there every other year as well.
Right.
So then what happened with Magnetic North is they created this thing called the Industry Series, which would bring together the people from the industry, sort of like the PACT conference used to do. But it would be a very different kind of industry series, where we would talk about things, and we would have people. There was a young program called the Compass Points, where young emerging artists just out of theater school could come, and they could work with some of the leading theater people in the country during a 10-day period and learn from them and meet all of these other people from around the country.
Sure.
There were so many things about that festival that were so amazing. And one of the things that I really felt was important was to build the international presence at the festival.
Right.
So I had the opportunity to travel to a festival in Brighton. Gosh, I'm forgetting the name of it because I'm old. But Gavin, and Gavin's last name I can't remember, but he put on the most wonderful festival. And one of the things he did was he was always feeding people and bringing them together after the shows, which was not like that when you went to other festivals. You would go to the show, you might hang out with a few people you knew, but at that festival you were hanging out with everybody that was there from all over the world all the time you were there.
Right.
And so I made a lot of connections, and then I started inviting those people to come to Magnetic North, and I took Gavin's lead, and I started creating a lot of social occasions
Yes.
at the festival.
Yeah. Before and after.
Bar, you know,
Yeah.
there was always a bar there, but we made it more of a bar. But we got the international presenters much more involved.
Yeah.
They got to meet people, like standing in a food lineup. We asked them to make little presentations about who they were and what they did so that people could identify them.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you go to these festivals and the international presenters are invisible.
Yeah.
You don't know who
Right,
they
right,
are,
right?
right? But we made them visible.
Yeah.
And they actually really, most
Made
of
it
them
up.
really
Yeah.
liked it,
Yeah.
right? We had an unfortunate experience happen when we were in Whitehorse, because we had organized, as part of the fun part of those for the industry series, was to go on a canoe ride. Now, I don't know if you know the river up in
No,
Whitehorse,
I've
but it's
never been
very
there.
fast moving.
Yeah.
And I, of course, didn't go on the canoe ride because I was too busy doing other things at the festival.
Okay.
But lots of international presenters, you know, wanted to go on this big river.
Never been in canoe.
And there was one canoe where nobody in the canoe had been in a canoe before. And one of the people in the canoe was like the presenter of a very large festival from Australia. And the canoe tipped. She lost her cell phone, got soaking wet. They were in the middle of nowhere. They had to get out of the canoe, dripping wet. They were abandoned. Like they were you know, nobody around.
Nobody knew.
Well, they did know. The people in the canoe above knew. So someone must have had a cell phone and phoned, and someone
Right.
came and got them eventually. But she was on a plane home the next day.
Yeah.
I felt so bad. Oh my God. So, you know, safety should have been a bigger concern, you know, at that time when we were doing that canoe trip. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Less recreation. Stay in the bar. I think that's the.
Stay in the bar. But I met so many wonderful people all over the country. Still stay in touch with them today,
That's
you know,
good.
on social media. And, you know, can phone them up and say, hey, you know, how you doing? And,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
got to present some of the most exciting artists in the country, you
Yeah.
know, and develop relationships with them.
Yeah.
It was a wonderful, wonderful time. And then I wanted to come home back. And the other thing about it, running a festival like that, is that you can't stay in those positions for too long, because it's not about you. And it's not just about your aesthetic. You have to give other people a chance, right? To have that opportunity, right? Part of the reason I left the festival also was because when I took the festival over, when I arrived in Ottawa, that's a story. So I'd moved everything, sold our condo, we moved, and I go to work and a board member comes in and says, we're shutting the company down because there's no money in the bank. I was like, what? Man. So Ann Connors and I, we decided that there was money, we just didn't have it yet in our hands because we were going to Calgary, and Calgary was going to give us, nearly $500,000 towards the festival. So we had money, we just hadn't gotten it in the bank.
Yeah.
So we worked for free without being paid for a couple of months, I think 2.5 months, and we got things moving again and got it going. And the festival slowly had a humongous debt, such a big debt, that it took the whole time I was there to pay it off. But the reason I was ready to go was that I had paid off, I had reduced the deficit from $620,000 to $220,000.
Wow.
And I knew that with $220,000, and for the first time after the festival in Whitehorse, we didn't have to borrow money from next year to pay off
for this year.
The current year.
Yeah.
We were finally clear of that.
Yeah.
And that had been the first time since I'd taken the festival over that we were clear of that debt, of that cash flow
so
problem.
Everybody was pulling in the same direction until it came to really funding it, right?
You mean at the end there?
No, I mean, I always think when the debts happen.
Oh yeah.
That all of a sudden the funders go quiet.
That didn't happen with the Magnetic North Festival because people knew it was an important festival. And the other thing I started doing when I was there, and I started collecting stats. I called up the people who had been at Magnetic North from the beginning, and I asked them questions about how many shows did they do, how much money did they earn or their company earn, and how many people saw their shows. And I asked them for those statistics. And when I got those statistics back, I don't think I could do it from the beginning of the festival. I think I did it like 5 years back or 4 years back. But the figures were astounding, Like there had been something like $9 million in revenue generated for theater companies in Canada.
Right.
And there had been something like 4 million people had seen the shows. That would be after the festival, after they left the festival.
Right.
So those stats were like, whoa, this is fantastic. So they really liked that.
It's a real incubator kind of thing.
Oh yeah, it was a total incubator. It was such an incredibly important festival. And the other thing was that, of course, we had the NAC. We were the poor cousin, but the NAC had our back. And Peter Herndorf had our back. And Peter Herndorf was the CEO of the NAC while I was there. And he was the most wonderful mentor and human being. He's gone now. But he was so beloved by so many people, and so kind, and so smart. And he would lend the money, him and his CFO, whose name is just slipping my memory, but they were so good to me. And even though we had debt with them when I got there, they would still help us with cash flow.
Wow, that's great.
Right?
That's great.
They helped us so much. And I would sometimes sit in Peter Herndorf's office and cry. I would be so embarrassed. And he would say, don't worry, you're not the first person who's cried in my office. He was a wonderful person. And I felt very much part of the NAC family while I was there. It was really lovely working at the National Arts Centre and having their back. And of course the Canada Dance Festival, was there too. And they were the poor cousins as well. Because they were their own society, producing on their own. But they also had the support of the NAC. And sadly that festival had ended as well, Canada Dance Festival. Which was so sad because those were such important festivals. And then I left and I came back to run the BC Alliance for Arts and Culture. And I left the festival in good shape. And much better than I found it. And then the board of directors, I think there was a grant that they expected that they didn't get, and they decided, I think they were exhausted. The board was exhausted,
sure.
and I think the new staff were probably not up for the fight. You know, they weren't. That wasn't what they were looking for a career. Was that kind of a fight?
Yeah.
And it was a tough go. You know,
Yeah.
so so the festival sadly ended, which was a huge loss. And if you remember, Heather Redfern tried to revive it here in Vancouver, you know, and Heather was an incredibly huge supporter of the festival. She was an amazing, and I still think Heather is one of the best programmers in our country. She really is smart, and
She's been great for us.
she's just we are so lucky to have Heather Redfern in our community. Yeah. So then I came back home because I was wanted to be closer to my family, and I think living in Ottawa, going to work, seeing those Parliament buildings every day, and thinking about the arts and how much advocacy work they needed, I thought arts advocacy would be a really next interesting step in my career.
Right.
And I was really interested in it. So I took the job at the Alliance, and I spent the first little while trying to figure out what strategy I needed. What kind of a strategy could I use? Because I started talking to politicians and people about, why do you think it is that the arts have to struggle so much to get funded? And I would hear the same thing over and over again, which was, well, they're kind of elitist, and artists are very entitled. Some people would say that. They just think that they should be given money. And I think, you know, and I started thinking about that, and I thought, you know, you can't really brush that off, because that is important information to have. So then I realized what the job would be to figure out how to convince people of the value of the arts, because they didn't see it, and also to try to work with the community so that they would also understand that there was this perception and that we needed to do something about it,
Right.
to change it,
Right.
because it's a pretty common perception.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Only for people who can afford it, you know. There's only certain people who understand it, you know. People don't feel comfortable going into the theater, that whole thing.
Yeah.
So then I started doing a lot of reading what other people were doing around the world. And I found articles and things, and I found this one article that particularly had an impact on me out of the United States. Can't quite remember the name of the publication yet. Usually I do remember it, and it talked about, it had done this huge study about why do people go to the arts. And the thing that they found was that people go to the arts to feel connected to each other and to their community. And I thought, oh, isn't that interesting? And then I read another report. There were many reports coming out of the UK about the connection between the arts, creativity, and well-being.
Right.
And how being creative impacted your brain, your heart, your health, everything, right? And there were studies being done, and lots of them.
Yeah.
And we weren't really doing that in Canada. So I got a group of people together, and we worked with a sort of a change maker kind of organization, and I invited the community, you know, to come in, and about 20 people joined. And we have this workshop that we did with these two people over 2 days, and we dreamed about what the arts would be like if they were valued. And it was a really wonderful exercise. And then we basically came to this idea that the connection between art and wellness and creativity was really important, and that was what we needed to do as a strategy. That would be the strategy, to convince people that if they engaged in creativity, and you didn't have to be a professional actor or a professional musician, you could be someone playing the piano in your home, or it could be a kid drawing, but that any kind of creativity at all was a real boon to your health and your well-being and your mental state, right? And there was study after study, particularly out of the UK, that showed that.
Yeah.
And there was a woman that I had met when I was at Magnetic North, who started an organization called 64 Million Artists in the UK, in London. And I had stayed in touch and sort of followed what was happening with her. And she was right on the creativity thing, right? And she does this thing called the January Challenge, where people for a month, every day of the month of January, engage in a creative activity through online participation with ideas and artists. It's really grown and become this huge thing, and she gets tens of thousands of people who participate in it and does surveys and then gets studied by the mental health connection and all of that. So lots of incredible data. And so this group of us decided that that would be our strategy moving forward for advocacy. And so we started talking about that and using that. Not everybody was on board for that, because some people really have trouble with the idea of the instrumentalization of the arts. They think that if arts is for anything more than just aesthetics and beauty and meaning, that it's not, art shouldn't be bothered. So it was that, what I would say, elitist attitude towards art and creativity that were harming us. And I would always use the comparison with people. Look at sports. Like people who do sports, from children to old people to the professional athletes, like, do those people who do sports and the kids play on teams, are they diminishing those professional athletes in any way at all? Or those professional sports teams? No.
Yeah.
In fact, they're building audiences for them, right?
Yeah.
So that would be the comparison I would make,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And people would go, oh, yeah, that sounds, that's
You
interesting.
fall in love with hockey as a child.
That's right.
You're going to watch hockey as an adult.
Absolutely, and it's not a new idea, right?
No.
People have known that forever, that arts education is really the tool that we need to really make sure that people understand what the value is of engaging in art and creativity.
Yeah.
And that it's not just for professionals, it's for everybody, right? So that was my what do you call it, thing.
Yeah.
And I really worked with that, and I started, the minister at the time, Lisa Bear, I would talk to her about it. She really liked it. She really liked it, and so did the other ministers and the politicians. They really liked it. I talked to all the people who were on city council at Vancouver. I talked to them about it. They all really liked it too. And people could really get on board with this idea, And so we got increased funding from the BC Arts Council. We started to see the minister talk about well-being and the arts. We started to see this shift. And then when COVID happened, and we came together, all the people who ran the arts service organizations representing the different disciplines of the arts, we came together and we started talking. And this was a new group. This was not the group I worked with who had, sort of said, yes, that's the strategy. So I had to sort of very gently try to sell it to them, right? But because I was the one doing most of the work, I was able to write the material that we used with input and collaboration, of course. But they went along. I would say that they went along with the idea that we would spin this as health and mental wellness and all of that stuff. And sure enough, we got that, and we worked really closely with the ministry, and we got a lot of money for the resilience money and the recovery money from the BC government, right? Yeah. And it was because we had based it in this idea of the connection between creativity and well-being and art, right?
Bravo.
So that felt I was very proud of that.
Yeah.
We did a survey about creativity in BC. It was a province-wide survey about how people engaged in creativity before the pandemic and after the pandemic. The biggest finding out of that survey was that the number of people who engaged in creative activities doubled for those who participated in creative activities because they knew it helped their mental health. Doubled. Went from 12% of the population to 24% of the population who made the connection between engaging in creativity at a time during COVID and their mental health.
Right. Right.
It was a bang on
Yeah.
finding,
Yeah, yeah,
right? It was
yeah.
it was big news,
Yeah.
right? And then I ended up having to leave the Alliance because I was in a situation where I was trying to work with a committee of peers to raise funds for IMPOC artists who had really been hit hard during the COVID thing because they had less work and so they had less money and they weren't eligible for this or that, and so we decided we would come together and as a community we would ask our peers and our organizations to throw in money to help those artists, right? It was a really noble cause. And so we did that, and then we brought together people from different races, and we had Indigenous people, we had Black people, we had Asian people, we had, and I was really the only white person, really. And the reason I was there was because of my connection to the Alliance and supporting the initiative and stuff like that.
Right.
And I think what I would just say is that I got into trouble because I reacted strongly to something that that happened in the meetings that I saw between two different people from different races. And I saw something that happened that bothered me and upset me to the point where I eventually spoke up about it. And when I spoke up about it, I was accused of being a white referee and ended up being a racist because I was taking a side, right?
Yeah.
And my whole life I've always believed that it was important to stand up for what you believe in.
Yeah.
So it was really a hard blow.
Yes.
It was a big blow, and plus it was I really liked the job that I had, and that I thought I was doing good work, and so I was basically asked to leave the Alliance to save the face for the Alliance. So I was kind of sacrificed, for that, and that really hurt.
Yeah.
I'm still recovering from it, but I have realized that, in all of the things that we do, that I do, I think the lesson there was, do no harm, be careful what you say, and try to have a real viewpoint that is very neutral in those situations, and not to react emotionally to them, which is what I did. So,
well, everybody is so.
I'm a human being.
Yeah. Everybody. The times are very difficult.
Times are difficult.
And have been difficult now for several years.
Yeah. There's a lot of people being canceled.
There's a lot of identity going on.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to be, really hard to find the truth.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, everybody has their own truth, right? And but I think, it's important to do no harm and to have respect for differing opinions and things. But yeah, it hurt.
Yeah.
And I kind of took some time off, and really spent a lot of time in nature, walking in the forest and meditating, and going back to my yoga practice and my meditation practice, and really trying to heal myself. and also see myself, to look at myself. What could I have done? You know, how could I have handled that differently? And so, you know, things happen in life for a reason. And what's really happened out of that is that I've sort of come back into, for the first time, you know, think of myself as an artist. Yeah, so I'm writing and I'm, you know, working on the
What are you
never-ending.
writing? Tell us what you're writing.
Well, I'm writing a one-person show because, you know, I started out as an actor, really, even though I only ever did one professional acting gig,
Right, yeah.
and then segued into, you know, being a mother and being married, and then coming back and becoming a director, and then a producer, and then a, you know, all of those things. So I always really was an artist and an actor. So I want to go back before I die and do something that is performative that I've written myself.
Sure.
So I'm just writing about, you know, my life and about connecting it to my relationship to the natural world and how important that was to me in my life when I was younger and how I found it when I was later. And also, I would say, you know, I've always been a seeker from the time I was in my early 20s, and even younger, I think. I mean, my father was an atheist. We never went to church in those days, and I was always very curious about religion. I mean, I took courses of religion when I was in university. I've had partners from different religions. I have a Muslim, a Jewish man, a Kabbalion, a Buddhist.
This is like insurance. You're going to go to somebody's heaven. Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, I just have always had an interest in faith, the
Yeah.
idea of faith and spirituality, and also psychology, you know, which is really how I became really lit with an interest in it when I was, you know, in university, and humanistic psychology, you know, was the thing just starting out back then in the 70s. So, or gaining steam, I guess, by the 70s. So, yeah, it's also about, you know, a search for happiness, for peace, for meaning, and what is that, you know, and why have I been compelled to do that in my life? And where does it take you? And what is the point of it? And
Why have you been compelled to do it?
why have I been compelled to do it, you know, and what am I looking for? And, yeah. So
Yeah,
that's what I'm working
interesting.
on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah. Well, that's good. So that brings us up to date. And you're working for Only Animal.
I'm working for the Only Animal
Yeah,
as
yeah.
the general manager.
Yeah.
And, you know, I actually really enjoy not being the boss. It's the first time I haven't been the boss. And,
Yeah.
you know, working in theater and, or the arts. So it's nice not to be the boss. There's a lot less stress. And also being older, I think, you know, you have stuff that you've learned, experiences that you can share with the people you work with that are younger, and it's nice to be appreciated, you know, for your experience and your knowledge. Sometimes I feel there's not enough of that in our community or in our society, really.
If you could fix one thing about our art situation, what would you do?
God. Well, there needs to be a new governance model. The board governance model, I think, is a waste of time. And I don't mean to speak badly about the people who are on boards, because I know they're there because they want to help.
Yeah.
And they have good intentions. But when you're on a board for a not-for-profit society, and this isn't just the arts, this is not-for-profits.
Yeah. This is just
everywhere.
Not for profit. Yeah.
You have a volunteer board who have the best intentions, but they're not involved in the day-to-day. They don't know the details of the day-to-day, and yet sometimes they're charged with, you know, theoretically creating the vision for the company.
Major decisions.
You know,
sometimes.
major decisions,
Yeah.
hiring decisions, decisions that they don't actually have enough knowledge to make
Yeah.
about the company. And I think that's caused a lot of problems and continues to cause a lot of problems. And also the fundraising thing. I mean, nobody likes fundraising. Nobody wants to fundraise.
Yeah.
And small companies cannot attract board members usually who are
Have any clout?
heavy pockets
Yeah,
or
yeah.
have those connections. And then the problem sometimes also becomes, as you get bigger and bigger organizations that you work for, the boards that you work with have even less connection to the arts, and then they don't understand, and they believe that, oh, well, the arts is about selling tickets, isn't it? And getting bums in seats. So then they believe that, and they think that's what the arts are, and that's really not the kind of art that I want to do,
Yeah.
or that many of the smaller companies want to do.
Yeah.
So there's a real problem with the not-for-profit model, and
Yeah.
it's a serious problem. Everybody knows it's a problem,
Yeah.
and yet, who's going to change it?
It's a big legislative thing because, like you
Huge.
said, it's not just the arts.
Yeah.
It's, the baseball. It's, it's everything. Not Major League Baseball, but it's like community baseball. Every sort of, it's environmental. Any kind of thing is always going to be a charitable society.
Well,
and
it's
a charity.
it's public money,
Yeah, yeah,
right? That's the
yeah,
thing. You're
yeah.
getting public money,
Yeah.
and so there has to be accountable. But most boards,
Yeah.
and I don't mean to disparage those people, but many boards, people do not know
I've
how
been
to
on boards.
read those
Yeah, yeah,
financial
yeah.
statements or even the budget.
Yeah.
So when there's any questions about the budget, usually there's deathly silence because they really don't understand it.
Yeah.
There are some people who do that are on boards, but I think there's a way to do it where you have a very small board of advisors, and that it doesn't necessarily have to be that they have more power over you. That's just the way it's been set up. It could be much more collaborative in the decision making.
Yeah.
It's just that the model, Robert's rules, all that stuff, I mean, somebody just needs, and some people do it. They have changed it. Founders usually have the best relationship with boards because they found the company and the board just turns it over to
Yeah,
them and they
yeah.
run with it. And after that, when the founder leaves, the board changes, and especially if they're a board that's expected to raise money.
Yeah.
They start getting these corporate people on the board who have no understanding of why and what
Yeah.
the arts are
Yeah.
for people
And they try to apply their knowledge,
of business.
which is from a whole
Yeah.
other area,
Yeah.
and
They see it as a business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
No, we're a not-for-profit.
Yeah.
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 So, yeah.
It's tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think also that the theater, one of the challenges, I mean, is theater has to evolve, Theater is, it can't be like TV. It can't be, it's not the theater I want to see. I don't want to see a sitcom. I can see that on TV.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to offend my colleagues who do that theater because I know that lots of people love it and
there's a
enjoy
lot of
it,
theater like that,
and
yeah.
they did. It's just not for me. And I think that if people are losing audiences, then they need to ask themselves why they're losing audiences, and maybe their audiences are different now and they have different values and they are more interested. I actually believe that audiences nowadays, especially the younger ones, are actually more interested in participating and being a participant in the art.
Yeah.
Community engaged, I
Yeah,
think, is the future. Community engaged art, I think, is actually the future. Where people are being creative
Yeah.
with you,
Yeah.
and during the professionalism. I used to really think about the aesthetics of art, and I still love the aesthetics. I love the beauty on all of that, and I love the skill, but it's not just about that. There's so much more than that. And how often do you really see a show that just knocks your socks off with its virtuosity? It's rare.
Yeah.
I'm talking about, like experience where you've seen a show and you don't want to get out of your seat
Yeah.
because you've got this feeling that is so, you feel so different and so connected, and the tinglies or whatever they are, but you don't want to leave that space.
Yeah.
You know, and that just doesn't happen very often. But that has happened to me at things that have been done by non-professionals. So there you go. I think you lose your sense of the importance of the virtuosity, let's say, of the skill, or whatever you want to call that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the truth gets in the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because there's nothing like the truth.